The impeachment, the second impeachment of former President Donald Trump. You don't hear that every single day. It's day 2. We had our friend Roop Raj here with us yesterday. Roop, thanks again for being with us. A second day here on News Now from Fox. What are your thoughts of day 2?
Well, I think it's interesting because perspective is everything. And so far, we've seen everything that happened from the outside of the Capitol in. And today was the first time that we saw what was happening on that infamous day on January 6th from the inside out. Some of these new videos kind of were the star witnesses of today's discussion inside that Senate hall. And it was interesting to see some of it, and some of it was very disturbing to see. And they warned people who were watching, whether it be home or through the internet, that some of the views, some of the different images and videos were going to be disturbing to many people. And there's a reason for that. There's actually one video. Again, we saw a lot of video from the outside. This is now from the inside, showing some of the attacks that were happening by the protesters. We know that at least 50 armed protesters had made their way inside. And one of the pieces of video shows a security person being beaten very badly with some of the weapons that these protesters had brought in. Another piece of video, for the first time ever, that people were able to actually see today as part of evidence from the Democrat House managers, was Vice President Pence being rushed away from one room to another. There was also video showing some others, including I believe it was Mitch McConnell and some others who were basically being rushed away. In particular, one video that I found interesting is you see Senator Mitt Romney walking one way, and this video is revealing that he's being told to quickly pivot and move away, and he did. And he was just a few feet away from where these protesters were coming to attack. And these protesters weren't just waving flags and walking through. The people on the front lines of the protests were actually the ones who seemed to be the most violent when you saw this video. And so those pieces of video, Daytona, were really the big points I think that the House Democrats wanted to bring in today. And they kind of teased it, saying this is never before seen video, and some of it may be disturbing, and disturbing it was. Daytona?
Here's the big question, though. Is it enough?
Good question. And that is exactly what these senators are going to have to decide. You know, you take a look at the numbers right now. There's two different answers to that question. One is, will it be enough to convince the people who need to be convinced to switch their vote? We're talking about 11 Republicans in the Senate who essentially would have to pivot and switch their vote and say, yes, we believe that what Mr. Trump did on that day as president was inciting an insurrection. If they switch their vote, these 11 people, then you have a situation where the president could be impeached and convicted in the Senate. That's not likely to happen because it seems pretty clear that these Republicans who voted against even the constitutionality of this trial are pretty adamant in saying they don't believe that what happened was right at the Capitol, but they certainly don't believe that the president had anything to do with it in particular. You know, what's really interesting about your question, though, was the second point I wanted to make, which was, is it enough? Was the speech on January 6th enough? Or was it everything leading up to January 6th? And January 6th was the cherry on top that caused all of this to occur. That's what the Democrats are arguing today. In fact, they said, look, let's not just look at the speech on January 6th. Let's look at some other speeches and tweets that he had put out previously. One of the tweets saying, be there, talking about the January 6th event, previous to the actual event, it will be wild. There was another point at which in a speech he says, if you don't fight like hell, you're not going to have a country anymore. The argument that the Democratic House managers are saying, is it enough? Perhaps not the January 6th speech itself, but was it enough to say that everything leading up to the January 6th speech, and then that speech being an explanation point, was what caused the insurrection? That's what they'll have to argue, and successfully.
We're on a recess right now. When we reconvene, it's going to be Trump's defense team. What are your thoughts on their strategy to try to follow what was presented by the House managers?
It's a tough day to follow of obviously videos that don't lie, right? And you're going to see, obviously, I think you're going to see those videos, obviously, for some time in the news cycle. And I think the senators who are watching those videos as well, even if you're a Republican who supports former President Trump, you're not going to sit back and defend the things that happened in the video. I think the safest thing that you're going to hear from these attorneys is, look, what happened inside the Capitol that day was reprehensible, shameful, and awful. They'll have to come out and actually pivot and say, we understand that the video that we just saw was so disturbing, so awful. However, we're here to say, those lawyers, Mr. Castor and Mr. Shane, will have to say, we're here to say that this president did not cause those people to go do these things. One of the arguments that they'll likely make is the fact that many of these protesters with weapons already planned on being there before the president spoke that morning. So what was their plan? Had the president not spoken at all, had they been convinced already that it was important to go into the Capitol with their weapons? And that's something that they'll have to argue, these Republicans who are defending Trump throughout the evening tonight and then later tomorrow.
And Roop, speaking of former President Donald Trump, there's been reporting that he wasn't too happy with the performance of his legal team yesterday. Are we hearing anything new about that today? Obviously, we have not quite heard from them yet since this recess is in place. But what are your thoughts on that going forward?
You bring up a really, really good point because hearing the main defendant in this entire thing say anything, even if it be through other people, certainly is interesting, not only to us in the media, but anybody who's watching this unfold as well. It has been widely reported that the president had said that he's not happy with his legal team. Keep in mind that this president is someone who likes, as you remember on his Twitter feed, to get right to the point and be very strong-minded in his points, blatant, to the point, rogue, robust, whatever word you want to use. This man obviously did not mince words on Twitter. He is expecting the same from his legal team. Now, we can tell you that some media sources have said that they asked Mr. Castor, one of the attorneys who was being criticized allegedly by the president, hey, did you hear that the president's not happy with your performance? And we understand that Mr. Castor said just a few hours ago, I haven't heard that just yet.
And Roop, anything from today so far that has come as a shock to you, that was unexpected?
Nothing that I saw unfold today was a shock. I think, yesterday was kind of getting into the constitutionality of whether or not we should even be in this room in the first place. We didn't expect anything fiery yesterday, the first day. We understood that, of course, their main point was to sit back and say, hey, should we be in this room or should we not be in this room? Is this legit or is this not legit? Constitutionality really kind of encompassing legit or not. And they determined, of course, a little after 5 o'clock yesterday that it is constitutional. Today, we expected the fireworks. Today, we expected the video. I think it's safe to say that all of us were surprised to see the video because it had been never before seen video. But Daytona, at the same time, I can tell you that right now, those videos are going to be played in the news cycle for some time in the court of public opinion. How much will it convince those Republicans who need to be convinced to convict this president? It's unlikely to happen, but we'll have to wait and see.
Yeah, you bring up a really good point there. We've been waiting for these surveillance videos coming from inside Capitol Hill. I remember after January 6th, we're like, those are going to be really interesting to see. They held out until today, and I'm sure that there will be more in coming arguments. So we appreciate you being here with us, Roop. Any final thoughts?
I think we're, you have to kind of buckle in. This is not going to be as long as it was last year when we had that other impeachment trial. You'll have to remember that each side had 24 hours to put forth their opening arguments. In this case, only 16 a pop. And as you know already, they're not going to use all 16. So I think you're going to see things move along rather quickly. And remember, this is one count, incitement of insurrection. So it's 1 point they have to prove, something that they're hoping to do sooner than later.
All right, Roop Raj with Fox 2 in Detroit. Thanks for being with us. We'll talk to you soon.
Good to be with you, Daytona. Thank you.
And here we go. Here's a live look of that podium that's been set up. A lot of senators walking out there, responding, giving their reaction to the evidence that has been presented by House managers. We're seeing some reporting that some senators were incredibly shaken after seeing that video, specifically of Officer Hodges being crushed. It is shocking video. Other reporters in the chamber observed